the Ukrainians are not only fighting for their independence, the integrity and of their territory and their sovereignty, but that they are fighting for all of us, what the respect for the international law is concerned, what the respect for the UN Charter is concerned. And therefore it is so important that we all support Ukraine for as long as it takes. And again, accountability and delivery, to deliver on the subjects that you have pledged on or where you have promised things, this is the essence of democracy. And to fight for democracy, this is the most noble task that we can fulfill.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's a thing, you were really from the school, if you don't ask, you don't get. And you have never, ever shied away from asking. Both of you, the Hugh squared, I can say that about the both of you. Sabrina, the motto is where ideas become impact. And I know you've worked really closely with global citizen campaigns connected to food and hunger and the climate crisis. You know, we're not all just sitting up here looking pretty. We really want to make a difference. And we know that these conversations and these panels, and you get this message out, makes a difference. So what have you seen since you started working with Global Citizen? I think finally, especially when it comes to climate, you know, back in the day, people's eyes would glaze over. And then the more examples you give and the more educated you become, you realize, Houston, we have a problem.
I think that's absolutely right. I think we aren't just here, you know, just on a soapbox, lending a nice outfit like Gail's, because Gail, you do look nice.
Say looking pretty. Go ahead.
I'll take it. But what I've learned through the years with Global Citizen, and actually I met Global Citizen doing a field visit, I don't know if you remember, Hugh, Mick was there, with the International Fund for Agricultural Development, who I am now UN Goodwill Ambassador for and proudly for, and they were in the trenches doing the work. And it took me a moment to realize, because in my mind at that time, you know, Sierra Leone had just come out of the Ebola pandemic, which is where we were. Global Citizen and IFAD were there picking up the pieces, not knowing, ironically, we were about to go into a global pandemic. If somebody had told me that back then, I mean, I don't know what I would have thought, but it's so much more than what happens when you're in those field visits. It's the follow-up, it's the ask, like Gail said, and Hugh is not shy to ask. None of the Global Citizen team are, but it really is that accountability to leaders, to summits that we go to the panels that we are having. What is the follow-up behind those panels? And I've seen, and I'm so thankful to say have been a part of firsthand some of those commitments that have been made, you know, and there's been a few along the way and some really important ones and some I'm really proud of. Canada, my own home country, stepped up when the pandemic was happening to help support a rural stimulus facility when countries were suffering at the most, because let's be honest, like Gail said, people roll their eyes when we're talking about climate, but climate is such it's so much bigger than something that's happening when we get to 1 degree or whatever people talk about. It's happening to rural people now. People are waking up, not knowing what the weather is going to be tomorrow, having failed crops. I mean, these are real life disasters, real life situations that are on the doorsteps of so many. And it's picking up the pieces and finding solutions in real time that help people that are going through these issues in real time. Climate has exactly everything to do with gender. I mean, women make up the majority of the informal markets. They're a majority of the rural populations that we are supporting. Climate has to do so much with education. How are you sending your children to school if you're worried about what you're going to eat tomorrow? It's so much a bigger conversation than I initially thought. And it's easy to roll our eyes because it seems like something that's coming 10, 15 years down the road. But the work that we do now help support the people who have been forgotten along the way. And those are people in rural communities who are suffering through climate change today, not tomorrow. So I'm so thankful for the work that we've done together and the commitments that we've made. And it really is, it's a blessing to be a part of. But the work is important in the follow-up. And the follow-up is something I think that you've done a really good job highlighting.
Yes, I mean, Sabrina, if you don't have the planet, what do you have? You know, and I think people really need to understand how dire this is. Do you have something, do you have just a little climate nugget, I call it for lack of a better word, that the first time you heard this statistic or you heard this philosophy, you said, oh, we better pay. Did you ever have a holy shit moment about something about climate that sort of jarred you into reality?
There's so many holy S moments, which I say it more. But to be honest, hearing that, the people who we support through EFAD, who are rural people around the world in the agricultural sector, feed a third of the world's planet. 1/3. How are we forgetting about people who feed a third of our planet? And how are they going to do that if we don't help support them fight climate change and protect them when nature is literally knocking on their door? It was astonishing to me, the lack of funding, the lack of awareness. And because these people look like me and you, Gail, these are black and brown people around the world, rural people who have not had an opportunity to express the pain. And, when we do these visits and I get an opportunity to meet some of these people, I just think, oh gosh, these are the voices we should be championing. Mm-hmm. And Global Citizen, if anything, has done that, has had an amazing way of highlighting voices that have not been heard, who don't make news segments. And that's something that I'm really proud of.
Yes. Hugh Jackman, I can't stress enough the impact that night in your apartment that day, listening to Hugh Evans speak. And I know that since then you've been involved from the very, very beginning, and you've really encouraged other people to get involved. I would imagine that Hugh calls you at all hours of the day and night back in the day. Was there ever a time when your caller ID said Hugh Evans and you said, not here?
When I said not here.
But that you didn't pick up the phone because you're thinking, oh, Hugh Evans is calling again.
No,
I'm only kidding about
he was sleeping on my couch.
It's true.
Is that true?
Yeah, so there was no getting away from him. So I'm just coming up, I've got a meeting, and I'm like, Hugh, it's been 8 days.
I didn't realize.
We haven't told that story before, but that is true.
I have another very important statistic, because I was there not very long ago in Turks and Caicos at Hugh Evans' 40th birthday. So he's no longer a child. I just want to be very clear.
Yes.
This baby face is actually a grown-up.
Yeah, don't be fooled by the baby face. But
Hugh
what results
is relentless.
Go ahead. Hugh is what?
He's relentless.
He really is, but relentless in a good way.
Yes.
Sometimes people are relentless and it's extremely annoying with a capital A. This is not what this man does, and I can't stress that enough. No. I encourage all of you to figure out a way to have a conversation with him if you haven't already. But Hugh Jackman, since you've been here from the very start, what changes and results have you seen over the years?
Oh, so many changes. I mean, it was 2008 when we first met. And I was so impressed by Hugh as a man, as a young man, his vision. He was clear he was a disruptor. Yeah. But
before people even thought about disruptors.
Right.
It was that, yes.
But will it sustain, and will there be trust built, as you said, Madam President? And that is what has been so extraordinary, I think, by Hugh's leadership and the entire team at Global Citizen. And now here we are, 10 concerts now in Central Park. There's been 33 million actions taken by Global Citizens. There's been $43 billion raised because of those actions, and 1.3 billion lives affected. Wow. That's a lot from one organization. And this started as an idea 14, 15 years ago. But what has been extraordinary is how it's just grown year in, year out. And we saw incredible work, as you said, with Ukraine, with COVID. We continue to see great work, and I know it's going to keep growing because this is a movement. It's like it started as a very bright light. I was like, this is an amazing idea. It is now a wildfire, and it is just scorching through, and it's really at a tipping point now where I feel it could become really one of the major forces for real change.
Mm-hmm. It did. It started out as a little bright light, and now it is a wildfire. And can I say this, guys? None of us want to get burned. Sabrina, what specific actions do you think that citizens and government leaders can take to address the root of food insecurity?
And just to the point, again, that Hugh was making about how global hunger and climate are an inseparable conversation now. For me, it's adaptation, adaptation, adaptation. It's about protecting and creating ways for rural people to protect themselves against the effects of climate change. And countries really are now, I think, after many a bailat with you and Mick, starting to understand that long-term thinking is what we need to switch to. There's a lot of short-term solutions. When you see a famine, these things are important, aid is important, but what are we doing to keep these instances from happening again? For instance, I'm Somali, and I don't know if you're aware of what's happening in Somalia right now, but there is another famine. Another famine. It doesn't have to be this way. I mean, we need to set in stone measures to build resilience for rural people so that when these things do happen, we're not hearing the F word again and again. I've heard it my whole life now, and I'm sick of it. So just to be able to, pick up with governments, and actually even Germany stepped up and cleared arrears for Somalia when it came to EFAD, so that we could unlock 30 million in new funding to be able to spend towards adaptation. It's 1% of the funding at the moment, and it needs to be at least 50% when you're talking adaptation and mitigation. So I'm looking forward to picking up on those conversations. And then on a individual level, and one of the reasons I think panels like this are so important, it's about listening, learning, and using your voice, because everybody in this room now has learned something from one of the panelists up here that they can now share or help spread the information for. My mom always said to me, your voice is the most important thing you have, because even if you can speak to one person, you are influencing some kind of change. And it is so important to remember that. Global Citizen provides everything you need to be able to use your voice in a way that actually matters, and that's all they're asking. If you don't have $1 to your name, your voice is worth more. So I think it's so important to remember that.
I also think that for those people who have the power of the microphone, please use it for good, because there will come a time when you will no longer have the microphone. And could we just say congratulations and happy anniversary to Sabrina. She and her lovely husband, Idris Elba, have just celebrated an anniversary here in New York City, and now she's with you. Happy anniversary. Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Hugh Jackman, you said that sustainability is something, and I've seen this in action with you, that you've been very passionate about your whole life. So can you share with the audience how you took that passion that you have and you turned it into action?
I went to Ethiopia 2009 as an ambassador for World Vision, and we did some work with fair trade farmers. I met a guy called Dukali. He had 5 children, a 6th on the way, and I spent a day working with him in his farm, and he didn't speak a word of English, and somehow by the end we became friends. And
how do you
I made
spend
a promise.
A day, Hugh, for a second, working with somebody and their farm and they don't speak English and you don't speak their language? How did you communicate that way?
He just pointed, do this, gave me the shovel, do this, and I just followed.
Got it.
And it was the hardest work I've ever done. I'm an actor, after all. I'm like, Carly, I can do this for like 30 minutes, that's it. But I made a promise to him that I would do whatever I could to help farmers like him, fair trade farmers. And so in New York City here, me and my partners started a non-for-profit cafe, Laughing Man Coffee, which is down on Duane Street, if you want to go and get it. We give our profits back to the farmers we buy from, like Dukali.
Could you say the name of that again, please, Hugh?
Laughing Man Cafe.
Okay.
There's 2 of them, a 3rd on the way, but it was just a small way for us to connect the dots, and to how I could use my platform, hopefully to make a difference to the people we met. Because I think, as Sabrina was saying, there's so many small farmers like Dukali who are on the edge. One bad season, it's all over. The instability and the insecurity they live with is just unimaginable to most of us here. And a little bit of help from us goes such a massive, massive way. And I always go back. My dad used to remind me, what Mandela always said, poverty is not natural. It's not a normal state of being. It may be around, but it is human-made. And it can be human corrected as well. It's up to all of us. There's more than enough resources for everyone on this planet. We just have to find creative ways to share them.
Yes, poverty is not natural. I love that point. Hugh, I know, Hugh Evans, you've never backed down from a challenge. And so I want to end with Madam President. But before we do that, what's the first step you think we can all take to make an impact?
Well, I think firstly, it's important to realize that in this room are some absolutely extraordinary people. I'm going to single a few people out. Michelle Anthony and Kelly Curtis at the front are 2 of the most important leaders in the music industry in the United States. Prime Minister Erna Solberg of Norway, who ran the entire Norwegian economy for the last 10 years and is now joined the Global Citizen Board. Richard Curtis at the back there, who's probably the greatest filmmaker of our entire time and is also the champion of the Sustainable Development Goals. In this room are the people you can work with to drive campaigns that can create lasting change. And on the topic of Prime Minister Solberg, I want to share with you one example that shows the power of citizen action. A few years ago with Stephen Colbert, when Solberg was still Prime Minister, we launched what we called the Twitter invasion of Norway for girls' education. And one night on Stephen Colbert's show, together with Global Citizens, we sent so many tweets to Prime Minister Solberg that she called us from Oslo the next day and said, "Come to Oslo. I'm sick and tired of seeing all your tweets. I'm in the middle of a local election and I need you to shut up." And true story. And so we flew to Oslo. I'm not joking. This is actually what happened. We flew to Oslo the next day and she said, "What do you want?" in a bit nicer way than that. And 2 months later, beg your pardon, she got up on stage at Global Citizen and committed $200 million for girls' education. So that's the power of... And I say that because the next few days, you're about to hear, in addition to what you've already heard, you're about to hear from people who have plans to create lasting change. Mia Mottley, the Prime Minister of Barbados, who's with us right now, has been one of the few people who've championed the issue of fair financing for the emerging markets and for the developing world. Most of the world's poor don't live in the poorest economies, they live in the middle-income countries. So you actually have to address this as an issue of fair financing globally. Now, the thing that we're going to do as part of the next few days is we're going to make it easy to take action, but it only starts there, it doesn't end there. And what I mean by that is that I don't know if any of you are golfers in the room, if you play golf, but we're not going to ask you to hit a hole-in-one on a par 4. Yeah. We're going to put it right up to the, thanks, T-Box, you're a legend. You can
Thank
tell
you,
I'm
Mr.
not a
Dolan.
golfer.
Thank you.
And we're going to help make it easy to get that putt in, right? And that's just the beginning. That's the example of that campaign with Prime Minister Solberg. But I want you to all design campaigns because no one has a monopoly over good ideas. And we need the ideas of young entrepreneurs from all around the world who want to design the next campaigns from Global Citizen, who are going to take over my role, who are going to take over Mick's role, who are going to take over all of our roles, because it's not about us. The mission is always greater than all of us, and that's what we're fighting for.
Yes. Thank you, Hugh. Madam President, I want to close this session with you because this number is pretty staggering to me. Listen to this, guys. Wealthy nations promise to mobilize $100 billion annually to help developing countries who are disproportionately impacted by climate change. But they are $16 billion short. That's a very big gap. What do you think can be done to make sure they step up and honor their promise? We talked in the beginning about trust deficit.
Yes, you're right. This is a big gap, and it is shameful that we have not been able in the last years to fill that gap. The European Union has stepped up. We have contributed 23 billion to the 100 billion, but the 16 billion are still missing. So we have to rally my peers that we come up with the 16 billion this year because, I just said it's a question of trust and disappointment. And we cannot disappoint those who are benefiting from the $100 billion. So you have my word that I will do everything this year to find, those who have not delivered so far and discuss stuff with them.
Should we shame them?
Well, send text messages. This is good. And tweets. And as much as you can, yes, as much as you can nudge them toward that. And of course, it's my job also to rally my peers and to say, listen, we have to fill these 16 billion. But we also can do more than that. It's not 100 billion only. You said it, Sabrina, that it is the action that counts, that has to be done now. And I think the highly developed country, first of all, have to deliver themselves. We are the polluters. So this was, for me, the most important part when I started my mandate to have a very clear political vision. This is the European Green Deal. We have cast our goals in a law because I think only what gets measured gets done. So I'm a big fan of goals that you can then follow up whether they are being delivered. And we have by now put a price on carbon, not only in industry, but we're just finalizing the law to put a price on carbon in road transport, in buildings, in maritime, in aviation, because a price on carbon means very simply, if you want to pollute, you have to pay heavily. If you don't want to pay, well, then innovate and go into renewables, for example, go into clean technologies. And this is the way out. And it works, it works. But it's not only the work at home, it's also the work abroad. And there we have started a program that we call Global Gateway, where we invest together with countries, for example, from the Global South, because if we speak about fighting climate change, we speak about clean energy, we speak about wind, we speak about solar, it's green hydrogen, and these resources are in abundance in the Global South. So it's in our common interest that we invest, for example, in green hydrogen that is being produced, for example, in Africa and used in Africa, but for them also a source of income by having the European Union as somebody who says, we are willing, of course, to take the green hydrogen that you want to export. Or, for example, invest in the Great Basin to prevent deforestation. Invest in electric mobility in, for example, Bangladesh or Costa Rica. So all these are projects we are following up. And I want to say today, because it's not only action over time, but it's action now, that as European Union, we have decided together with the European Investment Bank that we will mobilize another 18 billion euros to make sure that there is investment in critical infrastructure in the Global South to fight climate change together. It's action now that counts.
All right, Madam President. You have had the last word. You've had the last word. Thank you so much. Over the next 2 days, guys, you're going to be hearing from artists, world leaders, private sector, and global citizens from all around the world on this planet. We're going to find out what action every one of us can take to address the most critical issues that are facing the world. This is the place where ideas become impact. People. Thank you for your time. Thank you.